Hi, I'm Kat, and today I have a true crime case for you, and I'll also be doing my makeup at the same time. But before we get started, let's just start with the word in Romanian for today, which is autobuz. 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 Well done, guys, you just said bus. It was 1997 when a bus driver stepped forward to help with the search for a missing 8-year-old boy who happened to live just a stone's throw away from his own home. It was a gloomy bank holiday weekend with rain falling intensely from the sky. The little boy had spent his day traveling aboard the bus, taking the Manchester-Ashton-under-Lyne route. As the day grew to a close, the bus driver brought the child to a stop just around the bend from where the child lived. But tragedy struck because the boy was never seen alive again. What happened next was every parent's worst nightmare, a horror beyond comprehension. The details of this case are not for the faint of heart because there is a lot to find out, so I just want to say prepare yourselves for a story that will send shivers down your spine. Jamie Aaron Lewis was an 8-year-old boy born on 16th of March 1989 in Greater Manchester, England. In 1997, he lived in Buckley Street, Manchester with his parents, Karen Spooner, John Levis, and his 4 siblings. Jamie was the middle child. He grew up in an allegedly notorious area known as Openshaw in Manchester. I do say allegedly notorious because I actually found conflicting reports about the area. Local people say that, 95% of the time this is a great place to live in, and the 5% is really bad, filled with youth gangs making people's lives a nightmare. But I guess it's kind of no different than any other area. Other people say that this area got the notoriety from people spreading rumors around, even though they never actually lived there. So again, I'm not quite sure. Jamie was a sweet little boy. He was adventurous, cheeky, he was a bundle of fun and joy, and when he wasn't watching cartoons at home, he would be outside looking for just another adventure. Although a healthy boy, he was quite tiny for his age. He was actually only 4 feet tall, and his mom Karen said that she would dress him in 5 to 6-year-old clothing. Jamie would spend his time playing outside in the neighborhood with his siblings all day long, but Jamie was afraid of the dark, and so he would never stay out late, and he was always home on time for dinner. It was May of 1997 and kids would often go outside to play on the street. But on this particular bank holiday Monday, the 5th of May, Jamie was hanging around the street quite bored and, really looking for something else to do. Being the little adventurer that he was, he went for the bus station. Just like a lot of boys his age, buses, trains, cars, they fascinated him. Besides, his mom's birthday was fast approaching and little Jamie wanted to go and buy his mom a gift. So he hopped on the 219 bus. Witnesses said that Jamie had a blast on the bus. It was his playground. He would change the gears of the bus, he handed out tickets to passengers, he even counted the money. He spent time in the driver's cabin, and the driver was even seen ruffling Jamie's hair. The passengers really believed that Jamie was the driver's son, so they didn't really see anything wrong with it. Jamie was allowed so much control of this bus that some witnesses claimed the bus was shaking and swaying and even mounted the curb after the driver allowed Jamie to play with the gear stick. Alice Abbott, a passenger on the bus, asked Jamie if he was having a day out with his dad, but Jamie said that it was actually his uncle. The driver had also bought Jamie drinks. This local bus driver was 28-year-old Darren Vickers, driving bus 219 between Manchester and Ashton-under-Lyne. He'd only been a bus driver for a few days before the 5th of May. Darren lived 3 streets away from Jamie and also from the Levis family. Darren's work references contacts were all fake, apart from one who was in fact a convicted pedo. At around 5 p.m, the Levis family was getting ready for their evening meal. Jamie hadn't yet come home from playing outside, but at first his parents believed that he just, lost track of time, or perhaps he went to his friend's house, so they waited for him a bit longer. Now it's getting to 8 p.m. Jamie's still not back home. Becoming very concerned at this point, as it was getting late, his family went out looking for him. They searched for hours, but there was absolutely no trace of Jamie. So they of course called the police to ask for help. This would become the biggest police investigation in Manchester since the Moore murders. The next few days were filled with stress, as you can imagine, with Jamie's family wondering where he was, imagining just the worst. The police going to the house back and forth, and Jamie's mother, Karen, appealing for information via a TV appeal for any help on her son's whereabouts. There were appeals being broadcasted, everyone was out there searching, and Jamie's family begged in the media for Jamie's safe return. Tips and alleged sightings started to come in. Jamie was seen on CCTV on that day by a bus station security camera. People saw Jamie boarding the bus 219 at 10:30 a.m. that morning on May the 5th. After these sightings, Jamie's sister Jane was approached by a man who said that he saw someone who believed could be Jamie. The man asked, quote, "He wouldn't happen to be wearing a dark blue Reebok tracksuit, would he?" End of quote. Jamie had been wearing that exact tracksuit. When Jamie was reported missing, Darren Vickers, the bus driver, told police that he gave Jamie a lift in his car at the end of his shift and dropped him near his grandmother's home. He said that Jamie was on his bus the whole day and he had bought a day saver ticket, spending hours riding around and looking out the window before being dropped off. A day saver ticket is basically a ticket which you can use to make as many journeys as you want on any of the routes within a specific zone during one day. It's usually, much cheaper if you need to travel repeatedly in the same day. So this is exactly what Darren was saying. Now it starts to get a bit weird here because, first of all, as other passengers have said, Jamie was around Darren the whole day in that bus. He was playing around in the bus, but Darren said that he was just looking out the window. But most importantly, day saver tickets can't be purchased by children. So what reason would Darren have to lie about this? Darren threw himself into the hunt for Jamie and he searched local streets, even handed out flyers, and he even offered to take part in a reconstruction of Jamie's last known movements in the bus station, along with Jamie's brother and his father. Darren got so involved in the investigation into Jamie's disappearance that John and Karen, Jamie's parents, trusted Darren more than they trusted the police. He had ingratiated himself with the boy's family so successfully that they gave him their full support when detectives made him the center of their inquiries. Acting as a spokesman for the family, he also gave a series of media interviews and told The Guardian, quote, "At times I wish I could just turn the clock back to that bank holiday Monday and that the boy had stayed at home here." End of quote. Just days after Jamie disappeared, Darren entered his parents' lives, playing the part of an innocent bus driver, haunted by the knowledge that he was the last person to see Jamie before he went missing. He would go on to front media appeals for the devastated family, even going on TV to speak on their behalf and urging the public to help find missing Jamie. He would also take part in searches for Jamie, despite his knowledge that these searches were simply going nowhere. Police began to regard Darren's role in the search for Jamie as behavior bordering on the obsessive. His involvement was so great that he lost his job and he even neglected his own family. Police suspected Darren's involvement in the crime, but they had no hard evidence. In the meantime, Darren inserted himself into the family and he was spending time at their terrace home so often that he eventually left his partner, Faye Stafford, and moved in, sleeping in Karen's and John's bed, with the couple offering to move on the settee downstairs to accommodate him. Darren even bought a bike for Jamie's brother John and asked Karen and John the father to be godparents to his new baby daughter Jessica. As the summer drew to a close, police were now convinced that Jamie was dead and that Darren was behind it. But because Darren was so endeared with the family, sharing these thoughts with Karen and John proved impossible, and police had to keep their cards close to their chest. One of the police investigators was assigned to support Karen and John and at the same time keep an eye on Darren. This officer would be at their home very often, and even he found it really hard to be so nice with Darren, especially knowing that Darren was involved. The investigator found it difficult to say anything to the family about the investigation without Darren being there, or without Karen or John telling Darren about any new information. But thanks to some outstanding driving offenses, Darren was arrested and jailed for 10 weeks. This kept him away from the family for a short time while the police moved on with their investigation, trying to find more holes in Darren's stories. On 14th of October, detectives finally felt that they had enough circumstantial evidence to arrest Darren Vickers with the abduction of Jamie, but they still didn't have enough to issue a charge of murder. Jamie's family had no choice but to accept the reality of what had happened. Darren's obsession with being in the media had led to him implicating himself and incriminating himself. Some teenagers actually recognized his face from the news and they went straight to the police with some disturbing details. They said that Darren tried to lead them into some woods late one night. One of the boys said that Darren showed him a picture of Jamie and then pointed ahead saying, "I think that's him." Darren then started walking away and the teenager turned around and ran. Apparently, Darren took Jamie's older brother John, the 11-year-old boy, into some woods and gave him a cigarette. He told John that Jamie was there and if he didn't behave himself, that would be where he would end up as well. Jamie's sister said that Darren started showing an unusual interest in John, buying him shoes and a new bike, but he didn't seem to care much for the other children. With this information, police, they began an extensive and meticulous search of the wooded area in the same location the teenagers described. Half a mile away from the path, police officers found tarp which was covering some clothing that matched what Jamie had been wearing on the day he disappeared. Police found a child's green wax jacket and tracksuit bottoms. The clothes were taken back to the police station and as they were laid out to dry and be forensically examined, police found a child's lower detached mandible or lower small jawbone wrapped up in the clothing. More human remains were found scattered throughout the woods, but most of the bones were never recovered. Bones from Jamie's torso were eventually found hidden in bushes on a golf course 5 months after he disappeared. Jamie's jawbone was found wrapped in his jogging bottoms. DNA testing of milk teeth confirmed that these were the remains of Jamie Levis. Due to decomposition, the cause of death could not be officially determined. Following this, Darren was arrested and charged with the abduction and murder of Jamie. Detectives decided to charge him with abduction in October 1997 and he was kept in custody and charged with murder a month after Jamie's remains were found. Police believe that at the end of his shift that day, on May the 5th, Darren took Jamie into the woods in his own car where he sexually assaulted, killed and dismembered Jamie. He then set about involving himself with the Levis family to keep the suspicion off himself and also because he had a morbid fascination with the case. He even started to use a scanner to monitor police radio, and he would turn up at places where Jamie was reported to have been sighted with Karen, Jamie's mother, even before the detectives would arrive. Darren also tried to pin the blame for Jamie's death on Jamie's father, John Levis, whom he suggested was violent towards his partner, Karen, and towards the children as well. Darren also claimed that 1 week after Jamie disappeared, he started a 3-month affair with Karen, Jamie's mother, and she was even carrying his baby. Karen, of course, she denied the affair, and she was actually forced to do a blood test to prove that Darren wasn't the father of the baby that she was carrying. Sentencing Darren to life in prison for the murder of Jamie and 4 years for abduction at Manchester Crown Court, Mr. Justice Forbes said, quote, "These are truly wicked crimes. Jamie's final epitaph came from the lips of his grandmother, Barbara Levis, who said he was streetwise, but he was a lovely little boy." Jamie's brief life was cruelly and prematurely brought to an end because he had the tragic misfortune of boarding your bus at around 10:30 a.m. on Ashton Old Road on May the 5th, 1997. Thereafter, you carefully groomed this little boy so he stayed on your bus for the rest of the day. You did this for your own base motives and intended to, and did, sexually abused this little boy and then killed him and abandoned his body in Reddish Vale. You unclothed his body and left it naked on the ground." End of quote. After his arrest, Darren gave an account of how everything happened to another prisoner. He then made a 15-page prison confession which he retracted, and then he retracted the retraction. In the original document, he explained, quote, "I'm not sure where it went wrong. Jamie was starting to mess with the ticket machine. I told him, don't, you'll jam it. I raised my left hand and hit him on the side of the head. I looked around and braked hard. Jamie, when I hit him, fell back, hitting his head on the luggage rack. His eyes were closed. I started to panic bad. I did not mean for anything like this to happen." Darren then said that he drove the bus to the depot. He drove home, took Jamie's body to an empty house next door to his home, then drove his family to his parents' home. He later took the body to Reddish Vale. Darren admitted that he fabricated evidence but insisted that Jamie's death was an accident and that he had nothing to do with the dumping of his remains on the golf course in Stockport, Greater Manchester, which the judge, jury and counsel visited during the trial. Darren later turned against the family and told the jury, quote, "I'm telling you, she, Mrs. Vickers, did not seem bothered at all. The way they were going around, you would never have thought they had a child missing." End of quote. Witness Robert Jones, a convicted widow, told the court that Darren admitted to murdering Jamie. It's possible that this Robert is the same that Darren used as his work reference contact, but I'm not quite sure. I couldn't really find out much information. The jury of 9 women and 3 men took just over 2 days to reach a unanimous verdict at the end of a 7-week trial in which the Crown claimed that Darren, described as widow by police, told lies with frills on. Jamie was described in court as an energetic scamp who'd scrounge money or cigarettes from shoppers at a supermarket close to his home in Openshaw, Manchester. Mr. Justice Forbes praised the police and also the teenagers who came forward with their stories about Darren, awarding the teenagers with £150 each from public funds. In an almost unprecedented hearing on May the 13th, 1999, lawyers for Darren Vickers returned to Preston Crown Court, where he was jailed for life in April, to formally submit his confession. Darren contacted police from Manchester prison and admitted to detectives that he had abducted, sexually assaulted and murdered Jamie Levis. Brian Lipson, King's Counsel prosecuting, said that Darren, who had tried to point the finger at Jamie's father, admitted that John had nothing to do with the death of his son. Darren contacted prison staff the day after his conviction on 24th of April and asked to speak to Detective Superintendent Roy Rainford, who led the case. 4 days later, in an interview with police, he described how he took Jamie against his will, abused him, and killed him on 5th of May 1997 at Reddish Vale. Mr. Justice Forbes said that he would take the confession into account when considering the recommendation of when Darren should be considered for release. But Darren still didn't say where the remains of Jamie's body was hidden. However, just days later, Darren contacted the media and he actually retracted his confession. I'm guessing that, he tried to use this only for recommendation from the judge. I gotta say, what a bastard. In 1999, Darren Vickers was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 25 years. He was eligible for parole 5 years into his sentence, but the police worked hard to ensure that this was denied. Apparently, Darren has since gone on to brag about the heinous crimes to fellow inmates in jail, detailing the abuse and murder of Jamie. Detective Roy Ranford believes that the day Darren was taken into custody, they had stopped a serial killer. In 2005, Darren tried to appeal against his conviction. This was the second time he had done so. Speaking at the time, his mother Wendy said, quote, "It's been so hard while Darren's been in jail. I feel like I'm in prison too. I'm doing everything in my power to fight this conviction," end of quote. And I get that she's the mother, but come on, what he did. How about Jamie's family? Friends? How do they feel like? In a forever prison, really. Karen and John will never get to see their son again, whereas Wendy's son, Darren, is alive. He eats, he breathes, he interacts with others, and he has his whole life ahead of him. But anyway, Darren got a bit of karma coming his way, and I can't really say that I feel bad for the man. Long-term inmate Richard Kenneth Tunstall, who has a history of serious violence against other prisoners, carried out a sudden assault on Darren in prison as both were working in a workshop at Frankland Prison, Durham. 33-year-old Richard has been in prison since a conviction for burglary at the age of 15. Concerned he may re-offend on his release due to becoming institutionalized, he remained in prison following a series of convictions for assaults on other inmates, including a slash attack and several incidents of throwing boiling water at victims. But he also assisted another inmate in the killing of a multiple murderer after locking him in his cell at Full Sutton Prison near York in September 2005, for which he received a life sentence with a recommendation that he could not apply for parole for 5 years in December 2006. Richard carried out the attack on Darren while working on an item of furniture in the upholstery workshop at Frankland in February 2014. He earlier signed for tools from the workshop store, but shortly after 10 a.m. suddenly walked across the workshop floor, approached Darren from behind and repeatedly struck him over the head with a hammer. When prison officers approached to restrain him, he fell to his knees and placed his hands behind his head. Darren was taken to hospital, suffering a triple skull fracture and 2 broken bones in a hand, caused by trying to fend off the blows. Richard later told police that he was fearful of release from prison, but claimed he carried out the attack on the spur of the moment after hearing the other inmate laughing. The parole board recently met to hear the case of Darren Vickers and whether he could be released from prison, which was denied. 56-year-old Darren has already served his minimum 25 years behind bars, and he became eligible to be considered for release in October 2022. As required by law, his case was referred to the parole board by the Secretary of State for Justice, with a review which took place on February 14, 2023. The panel had the options to determine whether he could be safely released on license or if he could be transferred to an open prison. Neither of these were considered suitable. A parole board decision summary shared with the Manchester Evening News saying, quote, After considering the circumstances of his offending, the progress made while in custody, and the evidence presented in the dossier, the panel was not satisfied that Mr. Vickers was suitable for release, nor did the panel recommend to the Secretary of State that he should be transferred to an open prison. End of quote. Darren didn't seek his release or to move to an open prison. Former investigator Asif Hussein, who is now 61 years old, spent weeks embedded with the Levis family in his role as family liaison officer. He believes that Darren Vickers should never be freed. He said, quote, "Vickers will be a danger to children for the rest of his life. He was a married man with 2 children of his own, and yet he was able to take the life of another child. He can never be rehabilitated, in my opinion." End of quote. Asif left the force in 2014 after 25 years in, and says that the murder of Jamie Levis was the worst crime of his career. He remembers how the team of detectives donated overtime money to pay for Jamie's distressed family. He still treasures thank you notes that members of the Levis family wrote to him for his care. Asif said that Darren was a very manipulative person. Quote, "I thought that the first time I met him. I knew he was a wrong one straight away. I went to the detective in charge and told him Vickers had done it. At the time I had 2 young children of my own. It was a very stressful time. I had to deal with the family and at the same time deal with Vickers, who had moved in. It was awful. I pretended to be his friend. I could not be nasty to him, otherwise the family would have told me to leave. I couldn't leave. I had to keep an eye on what was going on." End of quote. A 2018 TV documentary, Faking It, Tears of a Crime, analyzed how Darren Vickers tried to get away with his sickening crime. Experts told the program that Darren attempted to completely replace Jamie by worming his way into the heart of the family so that he could keep tabs on the police investigation. The program featured the image of Jamie's parents with a man they didn't know murdered their son sitting between them, bare-chested. Forensic psychologist Carrie Danes described the picture of Darren with his arms around John and Karen as the most bizarre image I think I've ever seen. She said, quote, "Where Jamie should be, right in the middle of the picture, is Darren Vickers and he's spread-eagled. He's got a very dominant body posture and he's got 2 arms wrapped possessively around Jamie's parents, who look shell-shocked, traumatized and just bewildered by the position they find themselves in." End of quote. And I personally have watched the documentary and I think that you should watch it as well. But that photo, I've seen the photo as well, I found that photo completely disgusting. And Darren had absolutely no place there in the middle of the parents, bare-chested. It's just disgusting. With other kids in the house as well, in the middle of grieving parents, acting as if he was, I don't know, on holiday. After the trial and conviction of Darren, Jamie's mother, Karen Spooner, said that her feelings were those of relief. Quote, "I don't really want to say how I feel. I hate the sight of him. Jamie can rest in peace now. We have got what we wanted. I hope he suffers like I have suffered with my family for the last 2 years." End of quote. She also told Manchester Evening News at the time that Darren was jailed, "I was destroyed when Jamie went missing and when I found out he was dead. For 5 months I lived through pure hell, wondering what had happened to him. My life was in limbo and I was helpless." The Levis family talk about Jamie every single day and his siblings make sure that their children know everything about their uncle. Photos of Jamie cover the walls of the home and Karen said she feels his presence every day. Jamie's brother John has since passed away in 2017, aged 31. Their father John passed away in 2020, aged 54. Now this case, in my opinion, was grooming of the worst kind, which ended in tragedy, sadly, with the loss of a sweet, innocent 8-year-old boy, Jamie Levis, who would have been 34 years old today. And if Darren wouldn't have been caught, I truly think that he would have just carried on. He'd already started grooming Jamie's brother John, whilst manipulating the whole family at the same time, manipulating the public, the media, the police, everyone. On top of that, he took boys in the woods. He wasn't finished. He didn't stop. He had the audacity to take teenagers yards away from where Jamie was, and even telling them and threatening them. This is just like, I don't even know, like a god complex. He felt like he couldn't be touched. He felt like he was all powerful and nobody can do anything to him. It's just completely horrific. Thank you guys so much for staying with me in today's video. Please let me know what you think in the comment section down below. For now, stay safe, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!